Hello and welcome to the book show on Diversity TV. I'm Ava Colby, a writer of fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. My Facebook and website are Ava Colby Books. I'm here in El Dorado, Arkansas. Yes, you heard that right. And I'm going to talk about 3 sets of books which can be very useful for people who just want more information to better themselves, students and teachers. This is broad foundational knowledge that I'm talking about, and it can be very useful. The first one is a set called Very Short Introductions, and they cover all different kinds of subjects. Could be historical subjects, could be philosophy, could be psychology. It can be a lot of different things, and it could be, say, a theory, or it could be a person, like a very short introduction to Sigmund Freud, or a very short introduction to Carl Jung. So if you want to, you've heard these names, you've heard a lot of different things, maybe you're very busy with work and or the important work of raising kids, and you really haven't had time to study these different things, and you think, when people talk about these things, I'd like to have something to say about it. I want to know what they're talking about on these programs on TV with these people who sound smart. I want to know what this is about. You can improve yourself with these books. They tend to be they're about that size, and they're about 100 pages. So they really are. They're a short introduction, and they give you a lot of the most essential information for people who just want that kind of foundational knowledge. That can be very handy to get yourself into a subject if you are a student or you're a teacher and you want to know more about it, or how to put it in language that's more accessible to people. It's a good way to have sort of that first read in a subject. I remember in one of my history classes in college, we were studying the Cold War, and our professor actually recommended that we read that as our first source, because he said it gives you that broad foundational knowledge. It'll tell you the main names, the main dates, all the most essential information, and once you have that in your head, you have kind of that scaffolding, that framework to then fill in all of that information going forwards with more detailed study on it and more detailed analysis later. So that would be the first of the 3 sets I would recommend. Another one is actually this Mometrix series, and it's designed for taking the Praxis exam. And the Praxis is the exam that you take to qualify to teach in United States public schools. But it gives you a lot of this broad information that will tell you a lot about different subjects that just you could find it as a way of just knowing more and bettering yourself in that way. So for example, it briefly explains here what anthropology is versus archaeology, importance of rivers and water to the growth of early civilizations, in case you didn't know about that. For example, it just says very briefly, the earliest civilizations are also referred to as fluvial civilizations because they were founded near rivers. Rivers and the water they provide were vital to these early groupings, offering water for drinking, cultivating crops, and caring for domesticated animals, a gathering place for wild animals that could be hunted, rich soil deposits as a result of regular flooding. So it gives you this kind of foundational knowledge that if you're really super busy, and especially if you don't have the money or you don't have the time, or you're in a part of your country which doesn't have a lot of infrastructure, and maybe you can't just kind of go to your local community college and take some classes to better yourself, because maybe for various reasons you don't have that option. This is a way to better yourself and improve yourself. And Mometrix also has a series of videos online if that's more accessible for you. The third type I want to talk about are these big fat notebook series of books. And they are very easy to read, very accessible, and they make them sort of for middle school or for high school. And I first heard about these books actually from my daughter's middle school, a math teacher, because my daughter is a very emotional person, and she's very good at sort of having that intuition with people and cooking and those kind of things that are more family and social and emotional, and she's excellent at those things. Not the most analytical person. Her strengths are in more of that interpersonal and emotional kind of area. So those kind of analytical, mathematical thinking things are a little less accessible for her because her intelligence sets are more on that interpersonal side. So she was really struggling with a lot of her math stuff. So I would go and help her with it and try to remember what I studied in math 25 years ago when I was actually good at it, because I was doing it every day. And so I was then contacting her math teacher, her middle school math teacher, to try to figure out how we could help her with her math studies. And quite frankly, I was getting quite frustrated because it is not my job to be a middle school math teacher. And having teaching experience myself at that point, 2.5 years of it, I can tell the difference between when someone's learning something for the first time or when I'm kind of reminding them of something that they kind of got before, and I'm doing reminding versus teaching them for the first time. And I communicated to the school and to this teacher, she's learning this for the first time when I'm showing it to her, so I'm not sure what's happening in the class, but she's not learning it the first time in the class. And my concern as a professional teacher was that the teacher might be doing this thing that when I was getting trained was called running with the fastest, which you are not supposed to do. That means you've got your students who are your strongest ones in your class and you just go with them, and you're not supposed to do that because then you leave everybody else behind. You leave them scrambling to figure it out. The way I was taught to teach, you go to your students' desks or tables, you check, you make sure everyone understands the activity you're doing, that there's comprehension with everyone. You don't just kind of sit at the teacher's desk and say, here's what we're doing. That person got it, that person, oh, that's my smart table, they always get it. Okay, I'm good. You're not. So I'm not saying that that's what the teacher was doing or not what the teacher was doing, just that there was obviously some kind of communication breakdown happening in the classroom that was preventing my daughter from learning. So I called the teacher and I very politely asked, well, are there any books you would recommend? Maybe I can get her a book to help her study at home because I can show her this and that. But since I work full time, I may not have time to do it. So it would be helpful to have this kind of reliable resource for her. And the teacher recommended a couple of books. Of course, I got them. One was a big fat notebook for the middle school math. I got that for her off Amazon. It was like new condition, excellent. Got her into that, made sure she understood how to use it. It's very straightforward, so I didn't really have to explain anything. I was like, awesome. So there are your books, and you can try those in class. If for whatever reason how the teacher's explaining it doesn't make sense to you, or whatever the issue is that's happening in the classroom, here's a book for you. So I was happy with that. Next thing I heard from her is the teacher wasn't letting her use the book in the classroom and was getting very irritated with her for trying to bring out this book and look at the book. So then I emailed the teacher, since it was after hours by the time I got home to hear about this, and I emailed her and I said, well, thank you so much for recommending these books to my daughter. I really appreciate it. They look really good and really helpful. I just wish you would let her use them in the classroom. That would really be helpful. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. So the teacher got back to me, was plainly irritated with me. That's fine. She said, your daughter can use the books at appropriate times in the classroom. I said thank you and controlled myself from saying something snippy like, well, what is an inappropriate time to use a math book in a math class, especially when it's the book that the teacher herself recommended? Anyway, I'm glad my daughter was able to move on to other teachers' classes this year, and so far she seems to be quite pleased with them all. I haven't heard any complaints from her about that, so I'm very happy with that. But these kind of big fat notebook or reference books, and I haven't even had the time to dig into these, but say you just want to better yourself by having more knowledge of the world or of history, whatever the subject may be. So just as a random example, what about the Han Dynasty? What do you know about the Han Dynasty? I know I've looked at this before. I studied all the dynasties so I could take my Praxis exam, and as you do when you cram, I promptly forgot a lot of it, unfortunately. So the Han Dynasty followed a rebellion beginning around 206 BCE. The first Han emperor, Liu Bang, started out as only a minor official whose parents had been peasants. Under his grandson, Wudi's rule, the Great Wall and the army were strengthened. The Han Dynasty began trading with the Western world through the Silk Road, a trade route from China all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. The main Chinese export was silk, made from silkworms. Europeans weren't used to such smooth, soft material. Great for underwear. It even has a little doodling of a little pair of underpants over here, so it's quite accessible, slightly funny. It's made, of course, for those kids, but that only makes it all the more enjoyable for adults, so it's not quite such a dry source of information. Have little doodlings and so forth throughout. So if you just don't remember what you learned about this in school, or for whatever reason you didn't have a chance to study it, it has a lot of that kind of a little bit of information. So it's a little foundational knowledge. And I really think that with knowledge and education, we better ourselves, and there are ways of getting this information besides going to a classroom if for some reason you can't get to one, or you don't have the finances for it, or you've had those experiences with those difficult teachers who are not easy to work with. So thank you for watching the book show on Diversity TV, and we will see you again next time.